good to be here together worshiping today, and we are really glad that you're here worshiping with us. We are continuing our series, Emotionally Healthy Relationships, and if you haven't picked up on this yet, as we talked about last week, this is all coming straight out of God's Word, which is what I love about it. And last week, in part 1, we talked about the necessary foundation where we have to start in this journey of 8 weeks in moving into a process of loving God and loving all people well. That's what this series is about. And the passage that we looked at 2 passages last week, and I just want to quickly remind you, if you were here and if you weren't, just to bring you up to speed on the necessary biblical foundation for the series. And the first passage is Jesus speaking in Matthew 22. We pick this up in verse 34. It says, "Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees and the Pharisees got together." These were the religious leaders of the day. "And one of them, an expert in the law, tested Jesus with this question, 'Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?' And Jesus replied, 'Love the Lord your God with all your heart,'" and that's everything that makes us, everything that we do, our motives, our thoughts, our energy, everything that we function out of the engine out of which we live, that's our heart. "Love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul," that's our humanity, our soul, our soulishness, "and with all our mind," our thoughtful mind. So with your whole self. Love God with your whole self. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these 2 commandments. So this is what we're aiming for, is to fulfill this greatest commandment and the second commandment, which is they go together. We can't say we love God if we're not loving all people well. If there's a relationship we're out of sorts, we're not loving God well. They go together. That's what Jesus is saying. You can't separate them. We try, but according to God and God's Word, we can't. So we shouldn't try to fool ourselves. If there's something going on in a relationship where we're out of sorts, or we're angry, we're frustrated, or we have unforgiveness, anything like that in a relationship where a relationship's not truly in harmony, we have to realize that there's something wrong between us and God. There's a barrier between us and God. So it's very important. And then as you go on to 1 Corinthians 13, Paul, in this great book of 1 Corinthians, he stops, takes a breath, and he talks about the thing that matters most. It's more of a detailed repetition of what Jesus said. 1 Corinthians 13, he says, "If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not love, in the sight of God I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and I give over my body to hardship or to the flames, I literally lay my life down for God, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing," in parentheses, from God. And so the Word of God is very clear that this is what matters most. And so it's important that we understand how to do this. And this is the basis and the purpose of emotionally healthy relationships. That's why we're going through it, because it's essential. And last week in our class, and if you haven't joined us, today's the last opportunity to jump in because we're in work week 2. And after that, we've covered enough that you really can't catch up. So if you want to join us, come over and get the resources. We have a workbook and we have a prayer guide, so we can be praying this. Praying the Word, doing Lectio Divina is what it's called. It's sacred prayer or divine prayer. So we're praying the Scriptures into our lives. That's what we're doing every day, twice a day, prayer guide. So it's very rich, it's very deep. We're living in the Word every single day as we go through this. So if you'd like to join us, come over and join us today. It's not too late. But last week, in relation to this call that I've just reminded us of in Jesus' words in Matthew, and Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 13, this most essential calling to love God and love all people. We looked at some skills last week. And the skills were around how we live in the truth in our relationships. We can't have loving relationships if we're not being honest with ourselves about what's actually going on within ourselves, our feelings, our emotions, our disappointments, whatever it is that we're feeling about a relationship with another person. Jesus said the truth sets you free. You have to know what's true. And for us humanly, sometimes we'd rather just avoid the truth. We'd rather just kind of set it aside if it's uncomfortable or awkward. We don't do that well. We don't press in well. And yet, the Word of God is so true. And it's so clear. And Jesus modeled it. He lived in the truth. And that's why He made people uncomfortable. Because He spoke truth. He saw truth. He went after what was true. Why? Because Jesus wanted to set people free. That's what God longs to do for us today, in our lives, in our relationships. So we have to start by facing what's true. And the Scazzeros, Pete and Jerry Scazzero, who put this whole course together, they call it a community temperature reading. Or you could say, what's the temperature of my relationships? What's actually going on in this relationship? What am I feeling? What are they feeling? What's the temperature? And so we talked about how we need to get in touch with the things we appreciate about each other. How good are we at being aware of and expressing the things we appreciate about each other? You know, so often we're more aware of the things we're bugged by each other. And we say that pretty easily, but we don't often reflect on how is this person blessing me? How are they a gift to me? How am I articulating that to them so I can bless them and strengthen our relationship? So appreciations. And then what do we do with those things that confuse us? Maybe we kind of think something's out of source, but we're not really sure. We don't have all the facts. So what do we do with that? We talked about that. What do we do with our concerns where we know something's wrong in a relationship? What do we do with that? We talked about that. And then we talked about the fact that we have to bring all new information to each other. We can't just assume that another person knows what we're thinking or what we're wanting or what we're hoping. We have to articulate it. Otherwise, we have problems. I mean, how many times have you had a problem in a relationship where you just thought they should know what you were thinking was right, and you assume that, and then you find out they really didn't have that on the mind, and they didn't know that, and so it creates a problem. So we have to be able to articulate what we are thinking is new information so we don't create problems in our relationships. And then the last thing we looked at last week is our hopes. What are we hoping for? Do we talk about that? Do we even know that? Do we sit with that? That's why we take time in this course for silence and stillness. Stopping, like we did at the beginning of the service. That's why I started doing that again in the services, like when I first came. I've learned it's essential for us to practice these ancient prayer practices of simply stopping. That's Sabbath. That's what Sabbath literally means. Stop. Stop being busy. Stop doing. And just be. Just be with yourself. Be with God. Get in touch with what's going on in your soul. Let God meet you there. That's why we have to create space for that. That's what the daily office is. That's why we have the daily prayer guide. It's to help us stop, hear from God, and then move out from there. So we can be moving in the power of the Spirit. That's what this is about. So we can love well. So we're empowered by God to love well. God can show us the things in us, in our hearts, that are not of God, that we're carrying, that God wants to free us from that. So that's what we looked at last week. And this week, we're taking the next step. And it's really a continuation of what we talked about last week. It's the whole thing of dealing with our assumptions. And my title for today is different than what they have in the course. I'm titling this, Avoiding Assumicide. That's an actual word. Did you know that? It is. Look it up. Assumicide. I'm going to give you the definition in a minute. In fact, let's just look at that. Let's look at the definition. Assuming is to draw conclusions based on tiny scraps of evidence in our own minds, to take for granted without proof. And see, that's the key. We don't have actual evidence of what we think is true about another, their motives, what they've done, they've not done, that bothered us, that hurt us, that made us angry. Without proof, we suppose it's fact without the actual facts. That's what assuming is. We do it all the time, based on what's in our own minds and our own experience. So assumicide is when we make false assumptions about others, portraying them often in the worst light, with the end being damage to that relationship. We do this all the time. I do this all the time. I have to be really careful that when I think or feel something about you, I have to make sure I know that what I'm basing that on is actually true, and not just what I think is true. And so I want us, there's two passages related to this need to avoid committing Assumicide. And the first one is the ninth commandment. Do you know what, in the 10 commandments, do you know what the ninth commandment, anybody know what the ninth commandment is? Remember the first four are really about our relationship with God, about loving God well. No gods before God, no idols, practicing Sabbath. It's all these things we need to do to have a good, loving relationship with God. That's why they're there, because God wants us to have a good, loving relationship with God. Because it's the main event. That's what Jesus said when he was asked. He's God. He's God the Son. He gave the same answer. The Old Testament connects to the New Testament. It's all connected. It's all about living into a loving relationship with God. And so that's the 10 commandments. And the second half, the second 5, are about loving people well. And the ninth commandment, it goes like this. Let's say it together. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. Some people say, you shall not lie. But I like this. Because what is it when we give false testimony? Gossip. It's when we make an assumption about somebody that's not true. It's something we have in our own head, in our own mind, that to us is true, but we don't go through the process of making sure it's actually true, and we actually maybe even go talk to other people, our friends, our trusted people in our life, that we feel comfortable talking about that assumption, that false testimony about that person. And we are breaking this ninth commandment. We're hurting that relationship with the person. We're assuming something of them that's not, we haven't even checked it out. We don't even know it's true. And so we're violating God's word when we do that. When we carry assumptions and we go talk to other people about it. It's called gossip. And it damages relationships. There's another great passage in James. James is our next passage in the New Testament. It's very much related to this. I'm just going to read it off the screen. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. The great thing about the book of James is James was all about taking God's truth and making it very practical. I love the book of James because it's all about practice, taking the truth of God, and wisdom is integrating it into our lives. How do we actually live this out? So how do we live out the ninth commandment? Here's how we do it. Dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be, let's say it together, quick to listen. Next one, slow to speak. Next one, slow to become angry. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires for us. Why is that? Because God wants us to live in a loving relationship with God and all people. And so, if I'm carrying frustration or anger or any unfinished business with another person because I'm assuming something unfairly, I have expectations that have not actually been validated or verified, I'm not being quick, I'm not being slow, what does it say? Quick to listen, so it's about listening first, not assuming what I think is right, but we actually go and we check it out. We listen, we talk. And we're slow to speak. We're more concerned about understanding the other person's perspective, not just our own. We're very aware of our own perspective, right? What's hard for us is to hear another perspective that's different than ours. That's what it's, so it's quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. So if I have anger, which is the opposite of what God wants for our relationships, I should say, though, real quick side note, there is a place for what's called godly anger, or righteous anger. It's when we see things going on in the world that we know are wrong, injustice, things where people are being victimized in the world. God hates that. God is angry about that. God always has been. God always will be. And so as we get to know God, as we take on the heart of God, as we begin to love as God does, we will begin to have strong feelings about those situations where people are victimized. And we will be moved to take action. That's the prophets of the Old Testament. And it's others throughout history, right up until today. There's lots of people in our world that are enacting that type of healthy, righteous indignation. So there's a place for that. But this is talking about anger that leads to sin. This is talking about Assumicide. This is talking about carrying something that we haven't really validated or verified. So here's the key principle for today, the biblical principle. We have a key principle. It goes like this. Never assume you know what another thinks or feels, and it should add, without checking it out. Without actually talking about it. How often do we just carry things and nurse things in our hearts without being willing and having the courage to pick up the phone and say, hey, something I need to talk with you about, something I'm concerned about, or something that I'm confused about, kind of getting back to, last week we used this little tool that said, I'm puzzled about this. Can we talk about it? It's a gentle way into a difficult conversation. So we talked about that last week. So often we enter into situations and conversations with people in relation to us where we have concerns or confusions, and we come blasting in because it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of courage to get in there and have those difficult, awkward conversations, right? We'd rather just kind of avoid them and hope they'll just magically fix themselves. Well, they just get worse. Have you noticed that? They just get worse. And so that's why Jesus, he leaned in with his disciples. He leaned in with the religious. He leaned in with people where there was something he had to deal with truthfully. But it's how we enter those conversations. So or we say something like, I noticed this, and there's something I would actually prefer. Can we talk about that? So just some basic skills, which is what we're breaking down in our course around tables. And we're actually doing this in pairs so that we can integrate it, then we can go practice it, and we come back and we talk about it every week. And we had a great time last week. I got last week after we finished the class, Laura and I went and we sat down over lunch. And we went through all 5 skills together. And we sat and said, okay, I'm going to tell you what I appreciate about you. Who doesn't like that? To have somebody say, hey, I just want to tell you what I appreciate about you. When's the last time you did that for somebody? Actually made time and said, I want to bless this person. And we did that for each other. It felt so good to give and take appreciations over our lunch. And then it's like, okay, the next one. There's something that I'm confused about in you, in our relationship. Can we talk about that? And then we had a great conversation back and forth. And then it was, I noticed this, and I kind of prefer that. We did that. And then it was like, this is new information. Something I don't think I told you. So we did that. And then it was like, this is what I'm really excited about. I'm hoping for this for us. It was great. We had a great conversation. And so we did that. We're going to do that in a new way with new skills today. But today, this critical calling of not committing suicide or having unhealthy expectations. Here's the question. What is the way that we get to a healthy, appropriate expectation where we're not committing to suicide? And I'm just going to quickly take you through it. You can write this down if you're not going to be in the class. I'm just going to take it through much more quickly than we're going to do next week. Next one. First, here's the first one. We have to know what we're feeling. Believe it or not, there's a lot of things where you just go on autopilot, and we're not even aware what we're needing and wanting. But we're assuming it because it's just part of how we were raised. It's the value system we were raised with. For example, I was raised in a family where you were supposed to communicate kind of quickly with each other. So as I've gotten older, and now we use texting and email and phone and these things, when I reach out to somebody that I'm in a relationship with, and I want to have a little dialogue, and I shoot them a text and say, hey, I sent you an email, can you read it and get back to me? I have an assumption that I'm not even thinking about, but it's in me, that they're going to get back to me at least within the day. And if they don't, I'm mad. How many can relate to that? It's like, why aren't they responding to me? Especially, it would have been easier living in the old days where you send a letter and it takes 3-4 days to get there. Or, even with a phone call, it's like, well, maybe before answering machines, it's like you got to actually talk to the person. Everything went slower. We live in this age where everything goes so fast, and so we have this expectation that everybody's going to get back to me because it's all about me and it's not about you, and I have my needs and you better meet them, and that's the world we live in. And we're a product of that. It's just in us. And sometimes we're just not conscious. We're just not aware of our expectations. We just function out of them. The way we know when something is happening that's going wrong in a relationship is we start to get frustrated. There's this bubbling frustration, anger, feelings that are not peaceful. They're the opposite of peaceful, easy feelings. They're upset and anxious and frustration and so forth. So that's a clue. Wow, okay, I need to get in touch. I need to become conscious. I need to become aware. That's step one. We have to do that first. Get in touch with what's actually going on inside. Second, it has to be realistic. That means that based on the history of my relationship with you and things we've already kind of worked through and how we function in our relationship, I know I can expect, here's a realistic expectation of you. And here's an example for me and Laura in our relationship in our marriage. It's a good thing she's not here today. Although she could probably, I don't think she ever watches my sermons, so actually we have this agreement around money. Now, you probably know that money is one of the main reasons people have conflicts in marriages. And sometimes it's the reason some people end up getting divorced. Because they don't sort this out. How do we share money? Because money is an extension of our values. We spend our money based on what we value. And so Laura and I have an agreement that's realistic because we kind of worked it through, that if we're going to spend more than $100 on our own, we talk about it first. And we kind of debated about what's that threshold? What amount to which can we spend money without talking to each other? We thought, okay, 100. Under that, if we feel like it's appropriate, we can do that. There have been times more than once when and I'll just keep it on me, because that's what we're supposed to do. When I spent more than $100 without talking to her, I just assumed that she'd be fine with it. I know Laura's values. I know what we share as far as values. And so I thought, well, this will be fine. Not so fun. You know what I'm talking about. Now, she had every right to call me on that because it was realistic. We did have an agreement. And so it has to be realistic. But so often, we make assumptions, and it's not even realistic. We just think, wow, they should know this, I should expect this of them, these are expectations, and it's not rooted in reality. It's our reality, but it's not a shared reality. So it's not realistic. The third thing is, it's spoken, and I already assume that. We talk about it, like Laura and I did about our money. We have an agreement. So that's a fair and realistic expectation that she can expect of me and I can expect of her. And if we violate that, we have every right to be frustrated. We have to have an honest conversation, we have to sort it out, and then we have to forgive each other. That's important too. And then the last thing is, it has to be agreed upon. Not just talked about, agreed upon. If you have an expectation or assumption of anyone, you're not aware of it, you're not truly conscious of it, It's not realistic based on your situation and your circumstances in that relationship. It's not actually realistic. Based on the fact that you've talked about it and it's spoken and it's been agreed upon, if you have an assumption or an expectation where you're angry at somebody and you've not honored these 4 filters of how we need to function in relationship with each other, we are breaking the 9th commandment. We are carrying a false thought, feeling, attitude towards another person. And if we act out of that, or we talk with other people about that, we are the one who is sinning, not the other person. Because that's all coming from within us, and we haven't actually done our work, our spiritual work. We've not been quick to listen and slow to speak, because we want to hear, we want to understand, we want to come to an agreement that then we can share. Then we're honoring, if we do that, then we're honoring the call of James chapter 1, this passage. The Old and New Testament call of God for us and how we live in relationship with others. So, really helpful tools. And so we're going to pray now. And what I want to do is just give us a moment, and I want you to, as we go into prayer, I'm just going to give you a moment. And I want you to think, is there any relationship where there's any tension or unresolved issues, or there's frustration, or there's anything like that, that is involved unfair assumptions? Just think about that, using that filter of it being conscious, realistic, spoken, agreed upon. And if not, if you're carrying something towards somebody where you haven't honored that process, that biblical process, confess that to God, that sin that you're carrying in your heart towards another person. So you can be freed of that. And then you can go to them in their loving, gentle way, have an honest conversation, so you can sort that out. Speak the truth in love. That's what we're called to do. So this is important, this is critical that we practice this. We know this when we practice this, so we can have loving relationships with all people. This is for all of our relationships today. So let's pray. Let's pray together. Loving God, thank you for your word of truth that sets us free. God, you long to help us grow up in our capacity to love the way you love us. Jesus, the way you loved people when you walked the earth, how you lived in the truth. And you spoke truth, sometimes firmly, but you always did it with the motive of love, of helping people face that which was true, so there could be a waking up to what's true, a consciousness, an awareness of what's true, and then a facing what's real, and then a digging in to have a conversation with you, with others, where that's needed, so we can sort it out together and come to a shared agreement. Lord, this is what you modeled. This is what we need. And so, Lord, right now, if there's any way that this is out of sorts, that we're not practicing this, that there's a relationship that is damaged, that needs healing, God, help us to now become conscious of that and just simply bring this to you in a spirit of self-awareness, not self-judgment, but self-awareness of God. You can help us, you can forgive us, you can heal us, you can free us, and then you can enable us to go and have a loving conversation. So Lord, hear us as we listen and as we respond. Loving God, thank you for speaking to us this morning what we need to hear so that we can be helped. And we can be a help to everyone that we're in relationship with. God, enable us now to live out your invitation, your loving invitation to us to love the way you love. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. The great truth about God is God is just waiting for us to come and be honest with ourselves, with Him, so God can help us. And so if you've done that today, know that with God there's no condemnation. There's just grace and forgiveness. It's what we just sang about. And so as we come, we say, God, this is me. This is where I am. Forgive me. Help me to love the way you love me. God will enable us to do that as we seek that. So may God enable us to want that, to desire that, and to allow God to love through us, through His power and His strength.